everyone, and welcome back. I'm so glad you could join me. My name is Wumi Ajayi. So, hopefully, this is going to be the last in the series of conflict. And I've been looking at conflict in marriage because a successful marriage relationship is actually one that knows how to resolve conflict. And as I've alluded to in my past videos, marital conflicts are not necessarily a bad thing. The most important thing is knowing how to deal with them in a productive, constructive, and supportive manner so that as married couples, conflict will make us grow, conflict will make us better rather than making our relationship go sour. And if we think about it, the overall goal of every marriage is to be happy. We just want to be happy in our marriages and not just superficial happiness. If we have money, if we have this contract, we're happy. No, it is that internal rest that we experience when our relationship is settled, when we have peace in our marriages. That is the happiness that should be our goal in marriage. In part one of this series, I looked at defining conflict, looked at the sources and causes of conflict, and our conflict behaviors. In part two, I looked at our cognitive biases in conflict. And in part three, I continued to look at the cognitive biases and also looked at what the Bible says about how we should think about our mind. So if you missed any of the series, please check them out on my YouTube channel. Today, I'll be looking at dealing with conflicts. And there are several, biblical insights that we can look at when it comes to how to deal with conflict. And they are the basis of the tips and, other things that I'll be sharing in this video. So first of all, I want to look at Romans 12:18. Romans 12:18 says, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Everyone. So if the Bible is enjoining us to make sure, as much as it lies in us, to live at peace with everyone, how much more our spouses, the people that we have vowed our lives and everything we have to. This verse also highlights the importance of doing our part in resolving conflicts and striving for peace. He actually puts the responsibility of resolving conflicts on both parties, irrespective of who is right or who is wrong. Because sometimes we put so much emphasis on the fact that, well, the person that is wrong is the person that should make the effort to resolve the conflict. But looking at this, it says all of us, as far as it depends on us, we should strive to make peace, to keep peace, to resolve conflicts when they arise. I also want to look at James 1:19 to 20. James 1:19 to 20 says, my dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. And if we all will abide with this, actually, we will have less conflict in our relationships in the first place. It says we should be slow to become angry. James here is emphasizing the value of active listening. It says, be quick to listen, thoughtful communication, slow to speak, and mastering our emotions, especially anger. It says, slow to become angry. When it comes to dealing with conflict, there are two approaches that we can have. We can have a constructive approach or a destructive approach, unfortunately. And the approach that we choose, we actually determine whether we're able to de escalate and eventually resolve the conflict, or whether the conflict is escalated. And then we know what the outcome of that can be. Conflict escalation occurs when there is an intensification of a conflict. So, in terms of how long it's going on for, or the things that our behaviors and what we do, violence, coercion, blackmailing, intimidation, criticism, and all those things can come in when conflicts are escalated. And these are the things that we need to avoid in our relationships. If we don't learn how to control our negative emotions, like disappointment, frustration, fear, anger, and all that. They can make working through our differences in conflict very, very difficult. We should also remember that emotions, those negative emotions, they are very, very contagious. The instinct of someone that is met with anger is for them to, to respond in anger as well. That's why the Bible says a soft answer turns away wrath. Because if you respond back in anger, then the conflict will just continue to escalate. And sometimes it leads to things like hostility, aggression, passive aggression, nagging, accusations, and all that. So we should, by all means, learn how to resolve conflict so that they don't escalate. So I want to look at a few constructive ways in which we can resolve conflict. Looking at the two scriptures that we've looked at, the first thing that I want to say is that it's important that we address issues early. We as married couples, we both need to make up our minds that when issues arises, we will address them. We should not let small issues fester, because when we don't address issues early, small issues can become bigger. When we continually sweep dirt under the carpet, small issues that we don't resolve. I don't mean that, we have to resolve every issue should become a conflict. No, but we should learn to resolve conflicts, disagreements, misunderstandings, clarify, and don't let things fester. Because when we keep sweeping things under the carpet, one day that carpet will be full. And sometimes it takes one small issue to trigger the explosion, and sometimes it can become an uncontrollable explosion. The second thing is that it's important that we employ a team approach to conflict. We are on the same team, we wear the same jersey. Even teammates have different ideas of how to score, how to win the match. And so it's important that we understand that, first of all, that even though we might have conflict, even though we might have issues, differences in our perspective and things, we are on the same team. At the end of the day, we share the same goal, and our goal is to win. So, to resolve conflict and to keep our marriage strong, we need to have that team approach. An American author, Zig Ziglar, says many marriages would be better if the husband and the wife clearly understood that they are on the same team. The third thing is for us to create a safe and conducive environment for discussion, for resolving the conflict. We should both work at creating that space, where we feel safe to express our thoughts, our feelings without fear of judgment, without fear of retaliation or any negative repercussion, and also without interruptions and distractions. And so when we're talking about, creating a safe and conducive environment, we'll be looking at things like, the right time, the right place. Sometimes, we might have to take ourselves away. My husband and I, we've had to, take ourselves away from the children, away from distraction, just to create a space for us to be able to talk through our issues, the issues we were having. We talk of, halt, HALT, which I've mentioned previously in my other videos. When you're hungry, when you're angry, when you're late, when you're tired, those are not the times to talk. Those are not the times to have any meaningful conversation, especially to resolve conflict. Some people will be like, I need to talk now. I just need to say my mind. It does not always very helpful to do that. And some people say things like, oh, do not let the sun go down on your anger. So we have to talk about it now before we sleep. Even when you're both tired, even when you're both stressed, even when all you both need is just a good night rest. Sometimes when we have a good night rest, by the time you wake up, your emotions, you have slept it off. You are not as angry as you were before you went to bed. You are because you are not as tired. And so it's important that we realize the things that will make us less tolerant in terms of having a meaningful and productive discussion. The fourth thing is that it's important that we communicate openly and honestly. And when I say openly and honestly, it will be easier actually when the first three things are in place. When when we address our issues early, we're not dealing with things that have piled up. When we have a team approach to conflict, when we have a safe and conducive environment, then it will be easier for us to have an open and honest communication. It's an opportunity to share our feelings, our thoughts, our perspectives about the problem that we have identified. And in doing this, I'll just stress that it's important that we are aware of how we speak and our choice of words. Speaking openly and honestly is not an excuse to say anything and everything and talk anyhow to our spouses. It's been recommended that when we're resolving conflict, that we use high I statements, to express how we feel, such that like things like I feel upset instead of you made me upset. I feel you don't do this rather than you don't do this. The former, the difference is that when we use I statements, we are owning our feelings, we are owning our opinions. But when we say you made me or you've done this, we're actually blaming our spouses for our feelings. We must also avoid using harsh startups, or sometimes we're just rushing into launching into a tirade of emotions and things like, what's wrong with you? Why can't you ever? You always do this. No, we should avoid using such startups. And while we're communicating openly and honestly, we should both our aim should be number five, which is to identify the problem. We need to both shine the light on the problem. And that's why it's important that we put our emotions aside, because when we are blindfolded by emotions, we will not have a clear mind and clear head to identify the problem. And in identifying the problems, it's not just the problem on the surface, because sometimes the things that are causing conflict, they go deeper than what we can see on the surface, especially when we are at the issues that are constantly causing conflict. We might need to look deeper. A very good example is, when we have conflicts on about money. The spender wants to spend, the saver wants to save, and so they start to have issues. And sometimes when we look at it, it could be as because the saver is someone that maybe they grew up in a home where they lacked, or they've experienced lack in their lives, and they've made up their minds that they don't want to go back there. They don't want their children to suffer, and so they worry about money. And if we don't dig deep, it might not necessarily be that the spender is spending excessively or spending unnecessarily. It's just that the saver, because of the deep rooted fear of poverty, of lack that they have, they might be constantly fighting with their spouse that they're spending too much, because their natural instinct is to save. And if we don't get to the bottom of that issue, of that problem, we might continue to have, the same issue causing conflict over and over again. So it's important that we identify the problem so that we can deal with it, or deal with them. Number six thing is that we need to attack the problem, not each other, because we can easily fall into the error of accusing each other, criticizing, blaming the other person, being defensive, stonewalling, going after each other's character, and all that, while we are trying to resolve conflict. But when we do this, nothing gets accomplished. Nothing. And it actually tends to suffocate our communication. It tends to to make it difficult for us to talk openly and honestly. And the only way to avoid this is to keep our goal in mind. Remember, like I said, the goal of every marriage is to be happy. We just want to be happy. And so, if we keep this goal in mind, it will help us to put the issue not between us, like they say, but to put the issue beside us. This is an issue that we have to deal with as a team. This is not an issue that is coming between us and causing division within our team. The seventh thing is to practice active listening. That verse that we read in James is be quick to listen. Listening is actually key if we're going to have any resolution of conflict. We must learn to listen to each other without interruption. We must learn to listen to understand our spouse's views and perspectives, even if it does not align with our own thinking. Our listening should not just be listening to form a reply or listening to defend ourselves. We should listen to understand. And one of the ways to confirm that we're actually listening to our spouses is to summarize what they're saying before we start to respond. That's a very, very good practice. So, what I'm hearing you say is you feel that I don't do this, you feel like this because of that. Because that then helps them to know that we've actually been listening. We should also learn to ask questions. You know, ask questions, clarify, and seek to actually understand the other person's views. If we don't do this, if we don't practice this, we will just be listening to reply them, listening to defend ourselves, listening to respond, and all that. Number eight thing is we also need to recognize and accept our differences. Most time, often couples say things like, if it was me, I won't do that. If it was me, this is what I would do. Well, it's not you. We are different individuals with different upbringings, personalities, male and female, life experiences, and so many other things that shapes our mindset and our behaviors. And we are also at different levels of spiritual maturity and our ability to align our lives to God's word and to live in obedience. And all these things shape our views, our perspectives, and our behaviors, which means that we will have different perspectives. We will have different views. We will have different opinions about different issues of life. It's not an excuse to neglect personal growth and self improvement. We should all be, seeking to improve ourselves, do better, know better, understand better, and improve ourselves generally. But it's important that we accept that we will be different in the way we see things, because that acceptance on its own can be very, very freeing. The ninth thing is that we both now need to find a joint solution. At this point, we need to learn to compromise, we need to learn to negotiate. We need to be willing to find a middle ground. Compromise is essential in resolving conflicts and ensuring that both parties feel heard and valued. We both need to agree on how to move forward from the conflict. It might be behaviors that we need to modify, actions that we need to take, individuals or together, safeguards to put in place so that the conflict does not happen again, and further steps to take if we're not agreeing. For example, do we need to speak to someone? What do we do? Do we need to come back and revisit the discussion and things like that? We both need to agree on how we want to move forward. And if we're unable to agree, it might be that we need to then set another time to say we still need to talk about this. We need to continue to discuss until we're able to agree on how to move forward. The number 10 thing that I'm going to talk about is the forgiveness decision. It's important to know when to forgive, and more importantly, it's important to know when to ask for forgiveness. We should both be willing to forgive and ask for forgiveness. It doesn't take anything away from us. It also deters the lingering effect of a conflict, because even when a solution is found, for us to be able to move forward on a clean slate, it is important that the spouse that has offended apologizes and asks for forgiveness, and the offended spouse should forgive and leave it there to enable us to move forward. A sincere apology has power, because a sincere apology acknowledges the wrongdoing on our part. It expresses remorse for any hurt or pain that has been caused. And it also creates an environment of humility, an environment of grace, an environment of forgiveness within our relationship. And when apologizing, it's also important that we avoid making excuses. I should not have, I'm sorry, yeah, this is what happened. I should not have done this. If not, no. with humility, we should, when we're humble in making, apology, we should avoid making excuses, placing blame on other people. We should take full responsibility for our actions and show willingness to make things right within the relationship. If you want more on forgiveness, I've done a series on forgiveness as well. Please check them out on my YouTube channel. The second to the last thing I want to talk about is mediation. It's important that we know when to seek help, and we should not be proud to seek help, because seeking help is not a sign of weakness or failure. Sometimes conflict can be too challenging to resolve on our own, especially when we can't come to a joint solution. We should learn, we should both agree on people that we can talk to. It's vital that we seek help from, a marriage counselor or a trusted or experienced impartial individuals, people that can provide new perspectives, people that can advise us on strategies that we can employ so that we're able to move forward from the conflict. When we talk to people, we should avoid talking to people that will stir up wrath, or people that will pour petrol on the fire that's already burning. And in seeking for for help, support with anger management may also be useful sometimes. Let's not shy away from it. Sometimes people need interventions in managing their angers. And the last thing I want to talk about is the importance of learning from the conflicts. We should both be able to identify lessons from the conflict, because learning from our mistakes means we don't repeat them over and over. The change that we desire is only possible when we're able to take lessons away from the conflict, and then we make up our minds not to repeat the mistakes that we've made. Before I round up, I just want to talk quickly about the frequency of conflict. I alluded to it briefly, but I just want to say that when there's a lot of, when there's constant conflict, when we're constantly at odds with each other, this could spell trouble. It's a sign that we're either not handling conflict in a healthy way, or that there are other things that are eating away at our marriage. Stress, external influences. Maybe you have people living with you, stress from money, from work, life pressures, dealing with children, children with special needs and things like that. It could also be our inflexibility and unwillingness to change. And if this is the case, it might be a good time to seek help. Seek help from a professional counselor. Seek help from people that will help us to, that will be able to look into our issues for us and help us identify things that we can do, maybe to reduce the stress that we're having and all that. But it's important that when we are constantly having, incessantly at odds with each other, incessantly having conflict, that can spell due for the marriage. And it's important that we do something about it quickly. Benefits of effective conflict resolution. It improves our relationships. I mean, it deepens our understanding of each other. It renews our hope and faith in our relationship. It improves our productivity. We're able to work together to achieve more. We're able to concentrate on other areas of our relationships. The energy that we're using to be at loggerheads with each other, we can put it into more productivity. It also improves our satisfaction. We enjoy peace and contentment, and that improves our overall satisfaction of life and of our relationship in general. Effective conflict resolution also reduces the stress that that we have in life and in marriage, because unresolved conflicts is a major source of stress in marriage. Even when we sometimes act like we're not bothered, but it is actually very, very stressful to be in a state of conflict. It enhances our communication, because if we learn to communicate in difficult situations like conflict situations, when emotions are running high, we will be able, as a married couple, to talk about anything and everything. Conflicts are an inevitable part of our human interactions, but it can be transformed into opportunities for growth, for cooperation, and mutual understanding in our marriages and other relationships. Identifying our conflict behaviors, biases, and all that can help us and empower us to approach conflict positively and effectively. A step ahead is also to be proactive in identifying potential sources of conflict and making sure that we concentrate on developing mutual understanding in those areas. Thank you so much. I'm going to end there. It's my prayer that the Lord will help us as we continue in our relationships, as we continue to grow and manage conflict as they come. Remember, like I always say, marriage is to be enjoyed, not merely endured. God bless you.